There's a famous quote from author Stephen King I've always related to. In this world, you have to pay as you go. Sometimes, all you have. I've found this to be true on more than one occasion in life. Everyone faces certain crossroads, especially if you're a traveller or have been in a situation where you've had to move around a country to find work, as I have. These situations always end the same. Or at least they always seem to have ended the same for me. In the end, you must leave behind everything that you've built because there's no solid base to build upon. No savings because you're living paycheck to paycheck. No family because they are far away. And not many friends because you were never in one spot long enough to build stable relationships. In my experiences, these times were usually spent in bars after work with drinking buddies. When the work dries up, you cash it all in and you move on to the next stop. And this was the way things went for me pretty much all the way through my teens and 20s. Reading about the life of director Kelly Reichardt, she seems to have lived this kind of nomadic lifestyle herself for a time. Reichardt has said that she lived in New York for 5 years without a permanent address and lived in friends' apartments. She's also mentioned in conversation how she enjoys traveling alone while driving on location scouts, a lifestyle that mirrors a lot of her protagonists' wandering in her work. Not only that, but a few of my own life experiences too. So this perhaps begins to help me explore what it is about Reichardt's work that I find so relatable. Watching Reichardt's films, I get the feeling that perhaps the filmmaker is drawn to characters who are drifting, especially in the case of 2009's Wendy and Lucy. Will Oldham's character in Old Joy is also perpetually drifting and searching for something in life, which stands in juxtaposition to his friend who has a solid, stable 9-to-5-ish job and a house and a family. In Meek'sCutoff, the characters are left in a perpetual state of wandering as we never find out if their search ends in their death or whether they find water. We, the audience, are left to read the human being who's leading them and decide if we trust them or not. Just like any relationship you would make while drifting a country traveling or looking for work. In Night Moves, the main protagonist is left wandering in perpetual night as he will never be safe or able to settle down again or indeed use his real identity. He has slipped through the cracks of life and is off the grid, just like our main character in Wendy and Lucy. The protagonist in Kelly Reichardt's Wendy and Lucy is a young drifter, played by 28-year-old actress Michelle Williams, who gives one of her best performances in this role. She holds the full weight of the film on her shoulders, and we spend the length of the story seeing almost exclusively Wendy's view of the world and her experiences of other characters within it. Wendy is a character that seems to refuse what is expected of her in life. Just like Oldham's character in Old Joy, Wendy is the opposite of the person who detains and condemns her way of life in the supermarket. The young clerk who publicly condemns Wendy for shoplifting seems proud to be putting someone else down for their social status, self-righteously stating, if you can't afford dog food, you shouldn't have a dog. Perhaps this is why Reichardt chose to make this clerk a kind of beefed-up jerk. He's almost like a high school jock. Could it be that he's projecting onto his job what he's been taught in high school? I'm the best, I look down on others. The fact that he is later picked up by his parents from work shows he has a very stable environment, which is again the opposite of Wendy. His character has no remorse and no redeeming features at all. His lack of empathy, a moment of self-righteousness, are partly responsible for setting the events of the whole story into motion. Without his lack of compassion, Lucy the dog would not go missing. The most heart-wrenching thing to me about this is that perhaps Wendy takes this personal attack to heart as she eventually chooses to leave her companion and friend to a more comfortable life when she realizes she doesn't have the money to look after Lucy. Has what this uncompassionate person said affected Wendy to the point where she believes it? This is just a theory, but Reichardt's films do have strong political and cultural messages and themes. So perhaps you could say that society has trained this young man to keep his fellow human beings down, to the point where the bullying works. This could be part of the reason why Wendy seems to give up on hope. Perhaps the filmmaker is asking, is this the way we should be treating each other? Reichardt was quoted as saying in a press interview about Wendy and Lucy that the main influence was just living in America and watching the divide between the rich and the poor grow so huge it's hard to miss. There is a lot that can also be said about how Wendy and Lucy can be looked at as being a critic of society and its structures. For example, the mechanic, played by the great actor Will Patton, uses what is expected of him as an excuse to refuse to help Wendy. Although he does try to help, it's on his own terms. He gains $30 for this transaction. He appears businesslike and a little cold. There is a warmth to his voice, but it's hidden behind his desk and that uniform that society and his job have placed upon him. He would like to help, but if he makes an exception for Wendy, he must make an exception for everyone. But who is he talking to? There's no one else around who could see his compassion. He could easily choose to help Wendy if he wants to. But it is the role society has given him that stops him from helping a fellow human being who he can clearly see is in ever desperate need. In the end, he does offer a discount, yes, but only after he himself has gained something. Even the most sympathetic characters in the film, of the security guard and the dog shelter staff, only help Wendy on their own terms. They don't sacrifice their time, jobs, or role in society. It is only in the very end of the story that we see a small glimmer of hope in the security guard when he offers his friendship to Wendy in the beautiful scene when he gives her a few dollars he is able to so that they can try and help her out, and tells Wendy to drop him a line if he's ever back in town. The receptionist at the shelter does seem to want to help, but seems condescending when Wendy can't give her an address and implies, if you don't have an address, like what social structures demand, I can't help you. Society and structure are constantly putting up barriers that separate us and make us fear that if we step out of line or do something that is not expected of us, we may lose our jobs or be exploited in some way. Being caring and compassionate is not a crime. If you have a skill that can help someone else, like say being a mechanic, why not just help that person? The answer seems to be that we are trained not to help unless it benefits us. This is a critique of modern society and modern civilization as we know it. A very powerful message that I can relate to, having been that person with nothing, alone in a foreign place and needing help. In my case, I was alone, but Wendy has Lucy to look after. And in the end, she is forced to give up that friendship because of societal pressures and rules. A story leaving us hopeless as Wendy slouches penniless onto a freight train, having paid all she has in the world before she has to leave town. Wendy and Lucy is a film about many things. Friendship, society, for me, loneliness, also hope and hopelessness. It's a film that I can relate to on an emotional level, having shared some experiences with the lead character. Reichardt is an exceptional filmmaker who creates work that can move us and educate us and asks us to question who we are and why we do what we do. She doesn't offer answers to these questions, but poses them in order to create meaningful movies that are important and show us ourselves often at our most vulnerable. Reichardt is a filmmaker who I follow, and I can't wait to see what's coming next. So this has been my brief analysis and appreciation for Kelly Reichardt's Wendy and Lucy, a favourite film of mine that raises questions about why we do what we do. A fantastic work from one of the greatest directors working today. Thanks for listening.